It's a beautiful day. Lucky that we live Hawaii. 24/7, 365. Swimming in the ocean anytime. Take a leap. Live healthy. Eat well. Be active. Live mono every day.
Take a little bike ride.
Aloha kako and welcome. I am Lynn Salamanca of the Women, Infants, and Children program of the Hawaii State Department of Health. I'm really glad to be here as your host for this episode of Foundations for Healthy Generations. This is a program for and about public health issues in Hawaii. Each month, the Hawaii State Department of Health invites you and your friends, family, and community to join us as we discuss public health programs, issues, initiatives, and concerns. In this episode, we will talk about an important component of public health, our Hawaii State Laboratories Division. Our special guest for today is Laboratories Division Chief Dr. Chris Whalen. Welcome, Chris, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come today.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a pleasure being here. I always welcome the opportunity to talk about our public health laboratory work in Hawaii.
You know, and as a fellow state employee, I'm curious, how did you get started with state employment?
Well, I'm a lab guy. I love working in laboratories, and I love working with laboratory scientists. I have my undergraduate and doctorate degrees in microbiology. I postdoced at Mayo Clinic and am board certified in clinical and public health microbiology. I spent the first 20 years of my career working in Army hospital research and teaching laboratories, with the occasional break to jump out of an airplane or rappel out of a helicopter. Anyways, a 2002 assignment to Triple Army Medical Center got me here to Hawaii, and that laboratory is just absolutely phenomenal. I really enjoyed working there. However, when the State Laboratories Administrator position came open in 2005, it made my decision to retire or rotate back to the mainland an easy decision to make. So I've been with the state laboratory since February of 2006. Absolute great people to work with, makes it a pleasure to come and work in the morning. And we also have a terrific group of laboratories, community laboratories, that we work with closely to solve problems and answer questions. There's so many things that we do at the state laboratories. It's kind of difficult to describe. However, there was a recent episode of Hawaii 5-0 that provided a springboard to a little segment on the Hawaii State Laboratories.
Oh, that's awesome. Sounds like great publicity. And I think we've got a clip from Hawaii News Now, so if we could take a look at that.
Welcome back. On the hunt for a suitcase of smallpox. In tonight's Hawaii 5-0, our islands were ground zero for a potential biological outbreak.
Could something like that really happen here? We sent Terry Okita to find out.
As Stephen Keahi, of course, that's Hollywood, but there are threats out there, and we have our own real-life team to help save the day.
Let's just say we ended the family business not too long ago.
Okay, well, it looks like he's got a new hobby. He may have gotten his hands on the smallpox virus.
Yes, our 5-0 crime fighters are cracking the case, but we've got some scientists that could probably craft something even better than a Hollywood ending.
Do we have any mutations that you see in this particular sample?
Tucked away in a secure location in Pearl City, microbiologists at the Department of Health's State Laboratory facility monitor a wide variety of public health risks.
Hawaii State Laboratories is prepared to deal with any kind of biological emergency.
The lab tests for things like influenza, West Nile, dengue, norovirus, and STDs. A smallpox outbreak would be a long shot since the virus was eradicated in the 70s. But say a letter or hoax surfaces here, threatening some kind of mass contamination. Authorities would contact the lab.
I figure that we'll be able to provide a necessary response or testing that we needed to do, maybe 2-3 weeks. That's the beauty about being part of a response network. We should be able to ask other public health laboratories to help us with the testing.
Yeah. Indeed, the Hawaii State Lab is closely tied to the Centers for Disease Control and the Food Emergency Response Network. Scientists here often check for food-related dangers like E. coli and salmonella and monitor air and water quality. They were also put on alert during last November's APEC summit.
There was a lot of biological monitoring that occurred in support of that particular event, and the Hawaii State Laboratories was very active 24/7 during that time.
So these microbiologists may not carry a gun and a badge, but consider them Crime Stoppers in the lab.
A Hawaii Five-0 crew actually came to the lab, took pictures, then recreated it on the set, making for an exciting day for those scientists. Terry Okita, Hawaii News Now.
That's a great story from Hawaii News Now. Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Whalen, it looks like you and your staff do awesome job at the state laboratories. Tell us a little bit more about what you folks do.
Well, we have a great team at the Hawaii State Laboratories. And as you might imagine, most of our work is behind the scenes. So recently we developed a little postcard that we're using to kind of get our message across. And it's a, did you know that the state laboratories does these things? And I think I'll talk a little bit about some of those bullet comments. I think we have some images also that'll help tell our story. One of our most visible activities is bioterrorism testing. So whenever there's a credible threat, white powder or suspect substance, the FBI or postal inspectors will deliver those samples to us, and we'll rule out things like anthrax or botulism toxin. We're constantly on the lookout for emerging or novel strains of influenza. In fact, we found a swine flu variant last summer in a patient from Maui. It was at that time the only case that had been seen west of Utah, and so that shows an important surveillance role that we participate in. And there's also drug resistance that we need to monitor carefully. The couple of the areas that we like to work on is looking for influenza resistance to Tamiflu. We do that with a technique called pyrosequencing, where we actually sequence the RNA sequences, and also we're very active in monitoring gonorrhea resistance. We don't do all the water testing in the state. And when I say water testing, I'm talking about the drinking water or recreational waters for microbial or chemical contamination. But we do have purview over them that's granted by the Environmental Protection Agency. So we monitor the labs that are doing the testing, and then we also do a fair amount of testing ourselves. Many people don't realize that we DNA fingerprint all the enteric disease-causing bacteria that are isolated from our clinical labs. So the Salmonella, Shigella, E. coli, 0157H7, you've probably heard in the news there's a recent outbreak. Well, that DNA fingerprinting that we do is what tells us that those 9 isolates or cases are related, even though we still have not found out what the actual source is. There's also other outbreak testing that we'll do, whether it's vector-borne like dengue, respiratory like influenza, gastrointestinal like salmonella, or sexually transmitted. We mentioned a little bit about drug-resistant gonorrhea as well. We train with first responders. A lot of folks don't realize that we as the laboratory need to do that. A lot of that is because we need to ensure that the first responders who are on site collect the samples and preserve the integrity of those samples. We also want to make sure that they test it for any explosives and things like that before they send it to us in the laboratory. We're okay testing for the biological agents, but leave the explosives out of the lab. We recently began testing shellfish growing regions and meats in an attempt to ensure a viable industry that is safe. Shellfish production is not always as clean as you might think, because the farms are in natural areas, and oysters and clams are filter feeders, so they will concentrate contaminants. So we test the growing regions and the meats to make sure that those products are safe for selling. I don't believe we have any images for our air testing, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that we've got 16 air monitoring stations on 4 islands, looking for all kinds of contaminants, from particulates to sulfur dioxide to bog that's provided to us courtesy of the Big Island. I think one of our more active areas lately is applied laboratory science training. We've had a number of sessions with our Sentinel laboratories. That's our laboratory network in the community that may see evidence of a bioterrorism agent, and so they will send those samples to us for confirmation or to rule out. And so we provide that training to them, and also recognition in terms of certificates and the such. We also host emerging infectious disease fellows. These are one-year fellows that come to us courtesy of the Centers for Disease Control, and we give them practical experience in lab science, and we in turn get some very bright and capable young men and women. John and Caitlin are recent EID fellows that we've had. We were thrilled to recently get a environmental public health lab fellow. Alejandro is working with us, and we're thrilled to work with him. And lastly, we hosted some Republic of South Korea scientists and Department of Defense scientists as we provided some conventional lab response network methods for them to learn. So that was some pretty good stuff. Another activity is our online licensing. We license about 12 to 1,400 clinical laboratory scientists in the state, and we do that via our online portal, where greater than 90% of participants pay online, which improves our efficiency for operating that particular program. One other way that we've used to kind of get our message out is we entered a contest. It was a little slideshow that was to depict our laboratory response network activities, and it was in the category of all in a day's work. And so that particular slideshow actually won at the National Laboratory Response Network Conference in Denver.
very impressed about the work that the state lab does. I mean, I hear about the state lab in the news, for example, for water testing for sure, but it's very much behind the scenes, but it touches upon so much in our everyday life. So thank you for sharing all that work and the pictures as well to speak on all the work that you folks do. I am a lot interested about the difference between a public health laboratory and a private laboratory. What would be the difference?
I get that question a lot. Hospital and clinical labs help doctors identify different individual diseases in patients. So it's a very individualized approach to laboratory testing, whereas public health testing and environmental testing is the impact of contamination or diseases on populations. So we're looking at large groups of people and how diseases behave in populations and how chemical exposure can influence people's health. That's the primary difference.
Okay. Well, earlier you mentioned that the state lab works with first responders as well. Mm-hmm. I'd like to hear about the state lab's role, or key role really, in addressing threats, bioterrorism threats, and other threats as well.
I like your use of the word key. I believe that the laboratory data often provides key information that helps us solve disease investigations, help us keep the public informed with timely and accurate information, and minimize the impact of disease on the community. We do that a lot through our national laboratory network, such as the Lab Response Network, the Food Emergency Response Network, the National Animal Health Laboratory Network. We're integrated into all of those. We also work with our local military, private labs, academic institutions, and had some interesting partners during the APEC conference where we worked with Secret Service and FBI and Homeland Security. Wow. and some other non-traditional partners that we worked with, because we played a pivotal role in the biological monitoring of the venues mm-hmm. there at the Leadership Summit. So that was pretty interesting duty for a bunch of lab people. So it's a lot of the success that we've had in establishing successful partnerships, I believe, really helped us earn the award for excellence in partnership that was recently awarded to us by the Centers for Disease Control and the Association of Public Health Laboratories. So that was gratifying to receive that.
It's great to be recognized for good work. I keep hearing a recurring theme of teamwork. There's within your lab and then also outside of your lab. And your office has been, or the lab has been nominated 3 times for DOH Team of the Year. And if you folks won it in 2010 for the pandemic flu response, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for reminding me. It's one of my favorite memories, winning that particular honor, because it's such a team effort with the laboratory, and so that was a very gratifying experience after having done so much for the pandemic response. And we didn't do it alone. We partnered with community laboratories in terms of preparedness. We were anticipating a deadly avian influenza outbreak, and instead we got a swine flu H1N1 thing that came out. But that networking with community laboratories to get advanced molecular testing out into diagnostic laboratories so that we could conserve our capacity for subtyping was critical in the statewide response to that pandemic. And so yeah, that was a very nice recognition.
Yes. And I would imagine that there might be some challenges to an office that needs specialized equipment and staff. So what might be those challenges that you've encountered in the past and perhaps anticipate in the future?
Well, that happens to be the subject of another postcard.
Oh, okay, great.
Trying to communicate our challenges, but not just challenges, but also strategies to address those. Probably the biggest challenge that we've had recently is the lack of an adjustment to our budget to account for increasing electricity costs. In the last 4 years, electricity costs have doubled, and we haven't had an adjustment. So that means that right now the power utilization consumes 78% of the state laboratory's operating budget from general funds. It's absolutely not sustainable. Thankfully, the fix for this adjustment is presently in the current budget request. So hopefully after this FY, we should be in pretty good shape for that. We also lost some capabilities during the economic downturn when we lost some positions. And it's constant challenge to maintain our technological edge with new equipment and new techniques coming out. We have had some success in getting some competitive external funding, but with all the budget debates that's going on now, the sources of those federal funds are going to be even more challenging in the future. But given our challenges, I think we've done pretty well with the resources that we have.
I believe so, and I think that this isn't the first time that there have been limited resources that's happened. I mean, this has happened in the past as well, and your the lab has risen and met those challenges and kept the public safe, I would think. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Whalen, for being a part of this episode and sharing so much about what the lab does. And at this point, I'd like to ask if you might have anything to share with the audience, any public health advice, perhaps?
Well, sure, why not? I believe you need balance in life, and I think we can all agree that workplaces can be unhealthy places. They're full of stress, junk food, oftentimes very sedentary. So what we've done at the state laboratories is we have a contest. We call it Dump the Plump. It's our state laboratory's version of The Biggest Loser. And so we have activities, brown bag lunches, classes, exercise activities at lunchtime or after work, and it's all about encouraging a healthy lifestyle and healthy choices. And we've been doing that for about 4 years now.
Wow.
And it's seems to be going pretty well. But also it's not just about physical activity. It's also, I think it's important to recognize employees for the contributions that they make. And so we try to make a big deal out of certifications, licensing, service awards at our division meeting, and so we can recognize what people are doing. And also something that I've done is created a Chief's Coin for Excellence. It's just a little token of appreciation that I give out to staff members to recognize a job well done whenever they've exceeded my expectations. So it's fun doing that, and it gives employees, a sense of pride in what they do, and it's well deserved. I think we as employers just don't do that quite enough. So that's how we try to keep people physically and mentally fit at the state labs.
I think it's really cool. I mean, because there's more to money than just, to motivate people. So I think this works towards establishing great morale in the office. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Sure.
And that That does it for our episode today of Foundations for Healthy Generations. My name is Lynn Salamanca. Hope to see you at the next episode. Until then, be well and ahui ho.
Gotta get up. It's a beautiful day. Lucky that we live Hawaii. 24/7, 365. Swimming in the ocean anytime.